the King of Cool left a final message that chilled his family to the bone. When Dean Martin's $30 million will was finally read, it didn't just distribute his fortune, it settled scores he'd been keeping for decades. Why did the man who sang about amour leave his own children in a legal nightmare? You won't believe the exclusion clause that tore the Martin dynasty apart. To the world, Dean Martin was the ultimate symbol of effortless charm. He was the man with the tuxedo, the cigarette casually dangling from his fingers, and a glass of whiskey seemingly permanently fixed to his hand. He sang of Italian love affairs, joked with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., and made millions believe that life was just one long, breezy party in Las Vegas. But behind that warm, sleepy-eyed grin lay a man who was deeply private, intensely guarded, and profoundly cynical about the people around him. When he closed his eyes for the last time on Christmas Day in 1995, the breezy persona evaporated. In its place stood a cold, calculated financial fortress designed to keep his family on a very tight leash. The $30 million fortune he amassed over 5 decades of dominance in music, television, and film wasn't handed over with a smile. Instead, it was locked away in an intricate, irrevocable legal vault that sparked a 30-year war, pitting his ex-wife, his children, and his chosen trustees against one another in a bitter cycle of lawsuits and courtroom betrayals. To understand why Dean Martin's final wishes were so clinical, you have to look at how he built his empire. Born Dino Paul Corsetti in the gritty industrial town of Steubenville, Ohio, he didn't start out with a silver spoon. He was the son of Italian immigrants, working as a bootlegger, a steel mill laborer, a professional boxer under the name Kid Croce, and a croupier in illegal gambling dens. He saw firsthand how quickly money could appear and disappear. When he finally hit the jackpot, first through his legendary chaotic comedy partnership with Jerry Lewis, and later as a solo superstar and a core member of the Rat Pack, he became obsessed with financial security. He wasn't the drunken buffoon he played on stage. He was a shrewd businessman who negotiated some of the most lucrative contracts in Hollywood history. But while his professional life was a series of triumphs, his personal life was a revolving door of domestic turbulence. He married 3 times and fathered 8 children. His first marriage to Elizabeth Ann MacDonald ended in a bitter divorce in 1949, with Dean gaining sole custody of their 4 children. His second marriage to Jeanne Biegger lasted 24 years, producing 3 more children, but ended in a massive multi-million-dollar divorce settlement in 1973. His third marriage to Catherine Hahn lasted only 3 years, during which he adopted her daughter. With 3 ex-wives, 8 children, and a massive web of step-siblings, the Martin family tree was a powder keg of competing interests, jealousies, and financial dependencies. Dean knew this, and as he aged, he grew increasingly weary of the demands placed on his wealth. The true catalyst for the chilling nature of Dean Martin's final estate planning occurred in 1987. That was the year his beloved son, Dean Paul Martin Jr., a handsome Air National Guard pilot and rising star, was killed when his F-4 Phantom fighter jet crashed into a California mountain. Dean Paul was the apple of his father's eye, and his sudden, tragic death completely destroyed the King of Cool. Almost overnight, Dean Martin retreated from the world. He stopped performing, turned down multi-million-dollar offers, and spent his remaining years in quiet, melancholic isolation in his Beverly Hills mansion. It was during this period of deep grief and growing paranoia that Dean began to look at his fortune and the family he would leave behind. He realized that without a rigid structure, his $30 million estate, driven by ongoing lucrative royalties from classic hits like That's Amore and Everybody Loves Somebody, would be torn apart by his heirs. On December 14, 1995, a mere 11 days before his death, Dean Martin finalized the Dean Martin Family Trust. He didn't leave his wealth directly to his children. Instead, he transferred his entire estate into this trust, naming his longtime Hollywood agent, Mort Viner, and his business manager, Laura Leiser, as the trustees. When he passed away on Christmas Day, the trust immediately became irrevocable. The terms of the trust were clear. Upon his death, The trustees were commanded to divide the massive estate into separate shares for each of his named beneficiaries and to hold each of those shares in a separate independent trust. It seemed like a standard protective measure, but it was actually a highly sophisticated mechanism of control. By placing non-family members in charge of the money, Dean ensured his children had to go through his business associates to get a single dime. But wait, because here is the shocking twist that the family never saw coming. The true weapon in Dean's estate wasn't just the trust itself. It was a hidden trap built into his divorce settlements and a silent war that would explode decades after his death. His second wife, Jeanne, and his own daughter, Gina, would find themselves locked in a legal battle not with outsiders, but with the very people Dean trusted to run his empire. Why did Dean's legal architects keep taking millions long after they were supposed to stop? It turns out, the King of Cool's final signature had authorized a financial siphon that his family was completely powerless to block. We are about to dive into the secret court filings that expose how his trusted advisors pocketed a fortune while his children were left fighting for scraps. To truly dissect this legal battlefield, we have to look at the first major crack in the empire, the 2009 lawsuit filed by Dean's second wife, Jeanne Biegger. When Jeanne and Dean divorced in 1973, their settlement was a masterpiece of Hollywood negotiation. Jeanne was granted half of all royalties generated by the classic records Dean made during their 24 years of marriage. It was a massive stream of passive income. But Dean insisted on a crucial buffer. He decreed that his talent agency, International Creative Management, would deduct their 10% commission off the top before Jeanne ever saw a single penny. For decades, this system worked flawlessly. Dean's longtime personal agent, Mort Weiner, managed the funds and took his rightful cut. But when Dean died in 1995, Mort Weiner and Dean's business manager, Laura Leiser, became the co-trustees of the newly irrevocable Dean Martin Family Trust, which held Dean's remaining half of the royalties. Then, in 2003, Mort Weiner passed away. This is where the paper trail turns dark. According to court records, Laura Leiser became the sole trustee of the trust. But instead of halting the agency commissions, since Weiner was dead and the agency was no longer actively representing the deceased crooner, Leiser allegedly continued to deduct that 10% fee off the top of Jeanne's royalties. Over several years, Leiser pocketed over $130,000 in commissions despite never actually acting as a talent agent for Dean. When Jeanne discovered this financial siphon, she filed an explosive lawsuit in the Los Angeles Superior Court, demanding an accounting of the trust and accusing the trustee of pocketing family wealth. It was the first public confirmation that the people Dean had hired to protect his legacy were actually using the structure of his trust to enrich themselves at the expense of his heirs. But the war between the ex-wife and the trustee was just the prelude to a much bigger, much more devastating conflict involving Dean's children. When Dean established his family trust in 1995, he included a specific, mandatory directive. Upon his death, the trustees were required to divide the entire trust estate into separate shares for each of his surviving children and to hold each of those shares in a separate individual trust. This was designed to give each child financial autonomy and protect their individual inheritances from the financial mistakes or liabilities of their siblings. However, the trustees, Laura Leiser and her later appointed co-trustee, entertainment lawyer Joel McCabe-Smith, flatly refused to do this. Instead of creating separate trusts, they kept the entire $30 million fortune pulled together in a single massive pot. By doing this, the trustees maintained absolute centralized control over the entire estate, including all licensing deals, music royalties, and image rights. This pooling of resources meant that if one child wanted to challenge the trustees, they weren't just fighting the trustees, they were fighting their own siblings' financial interests. For years, the children lived in a state of frustrated submission, receiving payouts at the sole discretion of Leiser and Smith. The tension finally exploded when the trustees attempted to push through a sweeping settlement agreement that would formally modify the trust, legally erasing the requirement to ever create separate trusts for the children. Most of the siblings, exhausted by years of legal gridlock and desperate to keep their steady payouts, agreed to sign the settlement. But one sibling refused to be bullied. Gina Romano, Dean's youngest daughter with Jeanne, stepped forward to challenge the trustees in court. She argued that the trustees were acting in flagrant violation of her father's explicit wishes and were leveraging the financial desperation of her siblings to force a modification that would strip them of their long-term rights. The legal battle raged for years, climbing all the way to the California Court of Appeal in 2022. In a stunning victory for Gina, the appeals court reversed a lower court's approval of the settlement, ruling that the trustees could not simply rewrite Dean Martin's irrevocable trust to suit their own administrative convenience. But while Gina won the legal battle, the war shattered the family's unity, leaving deep, irreparable fractures between the siblings who wanted to settle and the sister who fought for her father's original vision. To truly understand how deep this legal dysfunction ran, we have to look at how the trustees handled Dean Martin's most valuable asset, his image, likeness, and right of publicity. After his death, the physical properties and liquid cash were slowly distributed or spent, but the ongoing licensing of Dean Martin's brand remained a gold mine. From commercial advertisements to nostalgic merchandise, the King of Cool's face was still worth millions. But the trustees guarded this right of publicity with a ferocity that bordered on hostile. A prime example of this occurred in 2014, when the SLS Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, the historically significant property formerly known as the Sahara, where Dean and the Rat Pack had performed for decades, underwent a massive renovation. To honor the rich history of the venue, the casino owners installed a beautifully designed carpet in their lobby, featuring black and white images of vintage Hollywood stars, including a large portrait of Dean Martin. It was an artistic tribute to the very man who had helped put the Sahara on the map. Yet, upon discovering this, the trustee of the Dean Martin Family Trust, Joel McCabe Smith, fired off an aggressive legal letter demanding a $50,000 licensing fee and threatening a massive lawsuit for infringement. The casino owners were flabbergasted, arguing that the carpet was a historical and decorative tribute, not a commercial product. The conflict escalated into a federal lawsuit, with the casino suing the trust for declaratory relief. This aggressive policing of Dean's image didn't just target casinos, it created a chilling effect that made media companies and television networks hesitant to work with his catalog. Instead of celebrating and keeping Dean Martin's legacy alive for a new generation, the trustees' hard-line tactics locked his image behind a paywall of litigation, frustrating his fans and further isolating his family from the very legacy they should have been proudly sharing with the world. This catastrophic breakdown of a legendary star's estate is not an isolated incident in Hollywood history. But Dean Martin's case stands out because of the tragic irony involved. When you compare his situation to that of his closest friend, Frank Sinatra, the contrast is stark. Sinatra, knowing how volatile his children and his final wife Barbara Marx were, included a brutal no-contest clause in his will. Anyone who challenged the distribution of his estate would be immediately and completely disinherited. It was a harsh, blunt instrument, but it worked to prevent decades of public court battles. Dean Martin, by contrast, tried to be protective by setting up a complex system of separate trusts managed by professional advisors. But by giving his trustees too much power and not building in strong mechanisms for his children to easily replace them, he accidentally created a self-perpetuating legal oligarchy. The very professionals hired to serve the family became their legal masters, pocketing administrative fees and commissions while the heirs were forced to beg for their contractually mandated distributions. It serves as a cautionary tale for modern estate planning. A trust is only as good as the people running it. And without strict accountability, a fortune meant to protect a family can easily become the weapon that destroys it. In the end, Dean Martin's $30 million estate became a tragic mirror of his final years. The man who had once been the center of the world's attention died in lonely silence, and the fortune he left behind was wrapped in the same cold, unyielding quiet. The smooth baritone voice that brought joy to millions was replaced by the dry, clinical language of trust litigation, appellate briefs, and accounting disputes. The King of Cool wanted to build a financial legacy that would last for generations, but his hyper-protective planning instead ensured that his family would spend decades locked in a courtroom cage of his own design. If you want to see how another Hollywood titan's final wishes turned into a shocking multi-million-dollar betrayal, click on the video on your screen right now as we expose the brutal truth behind the will of Frank Sinatra and the secret war that tore his children apart. We will see you there.